I showed up at my parents' wedding anniversary only to be told I had no sit in the hall. My parents left a note for me which read, "You are no longer part of us. How would a wise son choose to be a plumber after gaining admission to 4 Ivy League schools?" I left quietly without confronting them. The next morning, the unexpected happened. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I've always said there's no shame in getting your hands dirty. Some folks find gold in the mud, and I found mine beneath bathroom sinks and busted water heaters. My name's James Callahan, born and raised in Connecticut, just 30 minutes outside of Yale. The kind of place where people drop school names like business cards and act like sweat is something to be ashamed of. My parents, Dan and Marlene, were exactly those kinds of people. Dad was a senior partner at a corporate law firm in New Haven. Mom ran a nonprofit that hosted more charity brunches than actual outreach. They weren't bad people, exactly, just wrapped up in image, appearances, prestige. I was supposed to be the crown jewel. The Callahan kid who got into all 4 Ivies I applied to: Harvard, Princeton, Columbia, and Brown. Every acceptance letter was framed in our foyer like some sort of academic shrine. But what no one seemed to notice, what they didn't want to see, was that I couldn't breathe under all that pressure. I didn't care about political science or business management. What I loved, what really lit me up, was fixing things. Pipes, water systems, old boilers, stuff most folks turn their noses up at. So when I turned down every offer and walked into my first plumbing apprenticeship instead, my parents acted like I'd died. First came the silence, then the passive-aggressive digs at family dinners, then eventually, complete withdrawal. We barely spoke these past 6 years. No birthday calls, no Christmas invitations. I'd send the occasional text, usually ignored or met with "busy. Hope you're well." I got used to it. Built my business from scratch. Made good money. More than good, actually. But I never flaunted it. So when I got a pale gold envelope in the mail last month, my name scrawled in my mother's elegant script, I thought maybe something had shifted. "You are cordially invited to celebrate Dan and Marlene Callahan's 30th wedding anniversary," it read. Formal. Stiff. Not exactly warm, but still an invitation. Part of me hesitated, sure. But another part, some wounded, hopeful part, wanted to believe it was a step toward reconciliation. I even bought a new shirt for the occasion. Navy blue, pressed collar, the works. The venue was one of those polished banquet halls near Westport, all chandeliers and marble floors. A valet took my truck, which already felt out of place among the Mercedes and Audis, and I walked in, trying not to shrink under the stares of distant relatives and old family friends I hadn't seen in years. The place smelled like champagne and lilac perfume. A string quartet played something classical I couldn't name. Everyone looked perfect. I approached the check-in table, gave my name. The girl behind the tablet frowned, tapped the screen a few times. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I don't see you on the list." I blinked. "It's James. James Callahan." "Yes," I checked under C. "There's no table number assigned either." I stepped back, confused. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I was early. But the program had already started. People were seated. My cousins waved awkwardly, then quickly looked away. That's when a man in a server's uniform approached, holding a small envelope. "Mr. Callahan?" he asked. "Yeah." He handed it to me with a tight smile. "This was left for you." The envelope was blank. I opened it, slowly, heart thudding. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. My father's handwriting stared back at me, neat, sharp, unmistakably his. "You are no longer part of us. How would a wise son choose to be a plumber after gaining admission to 4 Ivy League schools?" That was it. No greeting, no signature, just that line. I stared at it for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. For a moment, I thought maybe someone was playing a cruel joke. Maybe it wasn't real. But when I looked up and saw my parents standing across the room, raising champagne flutes and laughing with the mayor, not once glancing my way, I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I didn't make a scene, didn't tear the letter or throw it back. I folded it, tucked it into my pocket, and walked out the way I came. Past the string quartet, The gleaming floors, the careful smiles. I didn't cry until I got into my truck and sat there, watching the valets sprint in their black vests under the orange parking lot lights. That night, I slept like I hadn't in years. Something had broken, but it felt clean. The next morning, I woke up early. Habit, I guess. Years of being the first guy on a job site trains your body to rise before the sun. But that morning was different. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dim light, the note still in my pocket like it was burning a hole through the fabric. I pulled it out again just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. You are no longer part of us. How would a wise son choose to be a plumber after gaining admission to 4 Ivy League schools? It wasn't even the words that stung the most. It was the smug finality. Like they'd been waiting for the perfect moment to deliver the punchline. And my father chose his own wedding anniversary, surrounded by their polished circle of friends, to do it. No confrontation. No honesty. Just quiet exile wrapped in a crisp envelope. I thought about calling my younger sister, Megan. We'd grown distant, mostly because she stayed in their orbit. Yale undergrad, Harvard Law, engaged to some venture capitalist named Brian who I'd met once at Thanksgiving and found as charming as a brick wall. Still, I figured she might have at least known what they were planning. But when I opened her contact, my thumb hovered. What was I even expecting her to say? That she was sorry? That she didn't know? Or worse, that she agreed with them? Instead, I threw on a hoodie, drove down to a diner I liked near Norwalk, nothing fancy, just solid eggs, decent coffee, the kind of place where no one cares what kind of car you drive. I needed to think. I needed to feel like myself again. Midway through my second cup of coffee, I pulled out my phone and saw it, my name trending. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But then I saw the photos, me, standing in front of a half-completed skyscraper downtown, shaking hands with the city's real estate magnates. James Callahan, named youngest CEO in Callahan and Stone's history, read the headline on the Hartford Business Journal site. I hadn't planned for it to hit the media yet, but one of the partners must have leaked it. I stared at the screen in disbelief. You see, I didn't just become a plumber. I built an empire. Over the last 7 years, I grew my business from a one-man operation to a multi-million-dollar contracting firm specializing in sustainable infrastructure, commercial retrofits, high-efficiency plumbing systems. The kind of work that was changing the future of how cities operated. We'd merged last month with Callahan and Stone, one of the top 3 construction firms in the Northeast. And as part of the deal, they made me CEO. I was wearing coveralls and steel-toed boots in the picture. I looked rough around the edges, but I also looked proud. In that moment, I realized something deep in my chest. They had no idea who I had become. And then the call started. First it was Mom. 3 missed calls, back to back. Then a text. James, we saw the news. Call us ASAP. It's important. Then Dad. One voicemail after another, each more frantic than the last. James, your mother and I. We just saw the article. We had no idea. Call us, please. Another one. Minutes later. Listen, son, that letter. That was, well, it was supposed to be tongue-in-cheek. A joke. You know how your old man gets. Come on, give us a call. A joke. I nearly laughed out loud, sitting there in that booth. A joke is forgetting to include someone's name on a party list. A joke is ribbing someone at dinner. What they did, that was premeditated, deliberate. Public humiliation dressed up in a linen suit. I didn't respond. Not that day. Not the next. Every hour, another missed call. Every hour, another reason to feel nothing but disgust. Megan even chimed in, texting, they didn't mean it. You know how they are. Just talk to them. But I didn't want to talk. I wanted to remember every second of that cold rejection, because it made what I'd built mean even more. 3 days later, they showed up at my office. My office sits on the 24th floor of a new LEED-certified tower in Stamford, all glass and steel with a clean, modern edge. Funny thing is, I never wanted a fancy corner office. I always figured I'd stay in the field, boots on the ground. But once the merger happened, the board insisted. Said clients like seeing the CEO in a tie, even if I still kept a pair of work gloves in the top drawer. That Friday morning, I was reviewing final renderings for a community center project when Melinda, my assistant, buzzed in. There's a Dan and Marlene Callahan here to see you, she said, voice careful. My stomach tightened, but I didn't flinch. Tell them to wait, I said calmly. 10 minutes. I made them sit in the lobby on that expensive Scandinavian furniture they probably assumed I couldn't pronounce. I finished my meeting, sent the final approvals, then walked to the door and opened it myself. They stood together like they were posing for a photo, Dad in a navy blazer, Mom in some pastel sheath dress with a matching scarf. Mom smiled like nothing had happened. Dad looked like he was searching for the right words before he even walked in. James, she said, reaching out. It's so good to see you. You look very professional. I let her hand hover in the air before motioning them inside. You've got 5 minutes. Dad gave a little chuckle, like that would break the ice. Son, let's not be so formal. We just want to clear the air. I leaned against my desk. By all means, start clearing. Mom sat, her movements precise, like she was still at the country club. That note. James, it was a terrible mistake. Your father thought it would be a wake-up call, Dad cut in. We thought you were wasting your potential. You turned down 4 Ivy League schools. Do you have any idea what it felt like to tell our friends that our son was a plumber? He said the word like it was a disease. I exhaled, slow and deliberate. You didn't just think I was wasting potential. You thought I was embarrassing you. Mom's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. You invited me to that party knowing you weren't going to seat me. You wrote me off. Literally. And now, just because my face is in the news, you want to rewrite the story. Dad shifted, suddenly defensive. We were trying to motivate you. I laughed short, dry. You motivated me, all right. Just not the way you think. There was a beat of silence before Mom leaned forward. James, darling, we're your parents. We made a mistake, yes, but I held up a hand. Stop. I'm not here to soothe your guilt. I opened a drawer and pulled out the note. It was wrinkled but still legible. I laid it flat on the desk between us. You wrote this. You sent it. You meant it. I don't need an apology wrapped in excuses. Dad looked at the paper like it was radioactive. We were wrong, Mom whispered. Please, can't we just go back? I shook my head slowly. Back to what? You mean back to pretending I'm not good enough unless I fit your mold? Back to smiling through holidays where you introduced me as the one who could have been a lawyer? No, I'm not stepping back into that cage. They both sat quietly, their confidence unraveling. I stood. Look, I didn't build this company to prove you wrong. I built it because I believed in something you couldn't see. And I'm proud of what I've done. If that makes me unworthy in your world, then so be it. Dad's voice broke the quiet. James, please, don't do this. Don't cut us off. I looked at him, really looked. This was a man who had shaped so much of my self-doubt, who taught me to chase prestige over peace. And he was finally seeing he had no more leverage. You told me I wasn't part of you, I said evenly. So don't act surprised when I believe you. I walked to the door and held it open. You wanted a son who would chase your dreams. Instead, you got a man who built his own. You can either respect that or keep joking. Either way, I'm done playing along. They left without another word. When the door clicked shut, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought walking them to the door and making my position clear would be enough, that they'd lick their wounds and retreat to the world where I didn't belong, the one built on alumni networks and cocktail parties. But it turns out, pride is a hard pill to swallow, especially when you've spent your whole life pretending to be infallible. By Saturday afternoon, the phone calls started again. My mother tried first. She left long, weepy voicemails that always began with James, sweetheart, and ended with some variation of we just want our family back. Then came the texts, photo albums, screenshots of old birthday videos, blurry pictures of me in Little League uniforms. Manipulation in sepia tone. Dad wasn't much better. His messages were shorter, angrier. Enough of this. We made a mistake. Don't throw everything away. Followed by, you're still our son. Let's just move on. And maybe I could have. Maybe if they'd come to me with truth and vulnerability instead of this performance of remorse, I might have cracked the door open. But every word they spoke was still about them, their guilt, their embarrassment, their desire to return to the curated image of a happy, successful family. None of it was about me. The final straw came that Sunday night. I was sitting on my couch, legs up, pizza on my lap, watching some home renovation show where the host wore designer flannel and said things like open concept vibes. It was peaceful. I was peaceful. Until Megan called. Unlike the others, she didn't text first. Just a straight call, no warning. I almost let it go to voicemail. But guilt has a sneaky way of finding cracks. "James," she said before I could even say hello. "What the hell are you doing?" I didn't answer. "You won't return Mom's calls. You embarrass them at your office. You're acting like you've never made a mistake in your life." I took a breath. What mistake did I make? Meg? Choosing a career I actually loved? Not being ashamed of it? Or refusing to sit through another round of their condescension? She hesitated. "You know how they are. They wanted what was best for you." "No," I said, voice sharper than I expected. "They wanted what was best for them. There's a difference." She sighed. "You could at least try to fix this." I sat up. My hands were cold. "I tried for years," I said. "I tried when I was the only one who showed up for Thanksgiving, sitting next to an empty chair because Dad had to work. I tried when I sent updates about my business, and they never replied. I tried when I showed up to that damn party, stupidly hoping, they'd finally see me." I paused, and she didn't interrupt this time. But they didn't see me. They saw the version of me they created and couldn't accept I'd torn it down to build something real. She was quiet for a long moment. "They're hurting, James." "So was I said. But nobody cared until my name hit the headlines. I ended the call before she could say anything else. I blocked her number after that. Not because I hated her, but because I couldn't let her be their messenger anymore. I couldn't keep negotiating my peace just because the people who hurt me were suddenly uncomfortable with silence. That night, I wrote a letter. Not for them, but for me. "Dear Mom and Dad, thank you for the ambition, the drive, the relentless push to be more. You gave me the tools. But I built something different than what you envisioned. I built something better for me. I no longer need your validation. I no longer accept your conditions for love. This is not anger. This is clarity. And it comes with a boundary you cannot cross." I folded it, sealed it, and tucked it away. Sometimes closure isn't about getting the last word. It's about deciding when to stop talking. The days after I cut them off were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, exactly, more like the stillness after a storm. That eerie kind of silence where everything looks the same, but the air feels different. I went to work. I led meetings. I signed contracts, toured sites, cracked jokes with the crew. Outwardly, nothing had changed. But inside, it felt like I just amputated something that had been rotting for years, and only now was I feeling the phantom pain. I started noticing little things. How I always flinched a little when my phone rang. How my fingers hovered over the block list more than once, tempted to undo what I knew was right. And how, even in my most successful moments, part of me still searched for a pair of faces in the crowd that were never really there to begin with. My Sundays, once filled with strained brunches and fake smiles, became a time for solitude. I drove up to the Berkshires one weekend, stayed in a quiet cabin just outside Lenox. No phone, no Wi-Fi, just me, a stack of books, and the thick, wooded silence of early spring. I hiked. I cooked for myself. I sat on the porch for hours, watching birds pick through leftover snow. One morning, I pulled out an old photo album I'd thrown in my truck. It was worn around the edges, a relic from another life. Inside were pictures of birthday parties with cheap sheet cakes, camping trips with crooked tents, snapshots of me and Megan in matching Christmas pajamas. We were smiling. All of us were. And for a moment, I felt that old tug, that longing to return to something that never really existed the way I remembered it. Because the truth is, there were good times. My parents weren't monsters. They read to me as a kid. They cheered at my soccer games. They bought me a tool set for my 10th birthday and told me I had clever hands. But love like theirs came with strings. And the moment I stopped being who they wanted, those strings pulled tight and cut deep. A part of me wondered if I was being too harsh. Was I punishing them too much? Was I throwing away family over pride? But that voice didn't sound like me. It sounded like them. I remembered a conversation I'd had with an older contractor years ago. Joe, a guy who'd been in the business 35 years. We were kneeling under a crawl space, elbow deep in rusted pipes, when he looked at me and said, "You ever notice how some people treat you different once you stop making them look good?" I hadn't understood it then. I do now. Back home, things shifted subtly but steadily. Megan stopped texting. A few cousins unfollowed me on social media. At the next regional contracting conference, a family friend I hadn't seen in years pulled me aside and said, "You know, your mom's been telling everyone you're just going through a phase?" I smiled and handed him my business card. "It's a pretty successful phase," I said. Even among my own circle, there were questions. Well-meaning friends asking if I might reconcile, if I missed them, if I'd consider meeting halfway. I'd nod politely, but inside I felt like I was holding on to something more important than reconciliation, self-respect. And yet, some nights I'd still wake up thinking I'd made it all up, that the note was just a dream, that maybe I'd walk downstairs and find Mom in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, Dad in his robe reading the paper. But then I'd hear the quiet hum of my apartment, the space I'd built with my own hands, and I'd remember, I wasn't dreaming anymore. This was real. All of it. The hurt, the distance, the freedom. I didn't regret cutting them off, but I did mourn what could have been. I suppose that's the cruelest part of family. You grieve even while you heal. It's been almost a year now since I walked out of that banquet hall with a note in my pocket and a hollow in my chest. The edges of the pain have dulled, but they haven't disappeared. They whisper sometimes, in the quiet moments, when the world isn't loud enough to drown them out. But I don't run from that whisper anymore. I listen. I let it speak. And then I remind myself, I chose peace. That choice came with a price. I lost holidays, phone calls, shared memories. I lost the illusion of unconditional love. I lost the fantasy that family could always be repaired if you just worked hard enough. And some days, that loss weighed heavy. Especially when I saw coworkers talking to their moms during lunch breaks or watched fathers brag about their kids at networking events like it was second nature. But for everything I lost, I gained something I never thought I could have, a life built on my own terms. My company now leads sustainable infrastructure projects across 5 states. We've partnered with city councils, built green housing for low-income neighborhoods, trained a new generation of tradespeople who were once told, like me, that success wore a tie and came with a corner office. I walk into rooms now and don't feel smaller than anyone, not because of the money or the title, but because I finally know who I am. I don't measure my worth in degrees or diplomas. I measure it in the lives I've touched, the systems I've rebuilt, the men and women I've employed who can now feed their families with dignity. My team calls me boss, but when we're elbow deep in blueprints or surveying a site under pouring rain, we're equals. And that means something to me. That means everything. I've made peace with the silence. I've made peace with my parents' absence. People still ask, don't you miss them? Wouldn't you take it all back if they apologized? But the thing is, they didn't just hurt me. They erased me. They wrote me off when I didn't play by their rules. And forgiveness, true forgiveness, requires more than a phone call. It requires change, accountability, a willingness to see me as I am, not as they wished I'd be. And until that happens, if it ever does, I'm not going back. I think about the night I became CEO. Not the headlines, not the cameras, but the quiet moment after, when I walked through the site we were breaking ground on. Just me, the wind, and a row of steel beams reaching toward the stars. I ran my fingers along the cold frame of what would soon be a community space for families to gather. And I thought this is what I built. Not for them. For me. I smiled then. A real one. Not because I had proven them wrong, but because I had finally, fully chosen myself. And I would do it again. 100 times over. If this story moved you or made you think about your own family dynamics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. For more emotionally raw and deeply human stories like this one, hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you soon in the next story.